At WordWare, our mission is to bring structure and joy to human and AI collaboration, which has put us on a path towards helping anyone build AI agents. Because of where we sit in the ecosystem, we've been exploring a lot of the latest and greatest technologies in AI, and this includes Model Context Protocol, or MCP. Today, we're sitting down with Hugo. He's a former CTO who's now working with us here at WordWare, and we're excited to have this conversation to get insights into what he's been building, and he's been sort of our resident expert on exploring MCP here at WordWare. Should we get started?
Yeah, super excited.
Awesome. So really quick, for those who don't know you, I know you quite well, but for everyone else, what's your background? How did you end up here at WordWare?
So I'm Hugo, I'm 23, I'm from France, Paris. I ended up at WordWare about 2 months ago. Before that, I co-founded a company in Paris and Culture Tech and worked on all sort of projects as well. And right now, yes, like you were saying, I'm mostly focusing on building the WordWare MCP. But so what actually is MCP? Many people, like even when it came out, everyone was asking this question. And I still think today, not everyone knows exactly what Model Context Protocol is. So if I were to explain it, so Anthropic came with this protocol with the idea of standardizing the way agents talk to tools. So it's not trivial. And let me first define what a tool is. A tool is a skill that an agent can use. So most of the time, agents will use other APIs. Let's say you wanted to send a Slack message to someone. If you wanted to do that manually, you would use the Slack API. However, it's difficult for LLMs to just know how to connect to an API. So that's why Anthropic came up with this wrapper around APIs, for example, to make it easy for agents to use those external services.
So maybe tell us a little bit about why you decided to explore this further, because I think MCP came out as a technology standard that Anthropic was putting out. What made you excited about it? And it seems like it's becoming more of a standard.
Yes, definitely. It's funny because actually, when you look at what happened before MCP, there were other attempts at making a sort of standardized protocol. Many people thought that when OpenAI released the plugins, it was sort of the start of that, but not many people use those. So MCP, and that's why I'm actively working on it, it seems like one of those protocols that's actively maintained and used. If you look at the Model Context Protocol GitHub, there is a list of servers, and week after week, it keeps growing. And what's amazing to see is how new companies and big companies are making their own MCP. It shows that they definitely want to be part of tools that agents can use. And I think that's what's making MCP really good. It's this community that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when I think of like technology standards like this, I almost am reminded of, and I'm dating myself here a little bit, but way back in the day, there were like cassette tapes, and then there were CDs, and then there was MP3 format, and there were all these other formats.
Yeah.
And it seems like actually there's a lot of different mediums you can use, and there's a lot of different people coming out with different file types and all this type of stuff, but certain ones become the most popular and the most used. Feels to me like MCP is going in that route. We never know what'll happen. AI is changing every single week, but it seems like MCP is going that route to almost becoming a standard. It sounds like OpenAI is also adopting it. And I'd just be curious from your standpoint, why do you think that is? Is there anything technical or from the architecture standpoint, or what makes it feel like what's becoming the true standard in how agents will use tools?
That's a good question. It's difficult to pinpoint because technically speaking, I remember about 2 months ago, I ended up on this subreddit where people were just like, let's call them the MCP haters.
Okay.
They're saying that MCP is just a wrapper around an open API schema, which is already a sort of standard way of putting your API out there and telling to people that this is how your API works. And this is true, but I guess MCP is really focused around how can you make that accessible to agents. And it's especially interesting that Anthropic is behind this because they had in mind, I think when MCP came out, it came out with the Claude desktop app, not at the same time, but you could super easily iterate on your MCP servers through the Claude desktop app. And that's what made it like, it enabled developers to do so much straight away, which made playing around playing with it super easy. I know that Google released the agents to agents protocol as well. To be honest, I haven't looked into it that much, but I think what I really like about the MCP protocol is that you can just super easily play around and build stuff very easily. They have really good documentation. I remember actually to join WordWare, they gave me a task, and that task was to build an MCP server, like a very V0 version of what I'm building today, but around the WordWare API. And I remember it was right around the time when the MCP servers came out, and already, even though it was quite recent, I was already able to build some cool stuff out of the box. So I think that like definitely helps a lot.
Maybe take us back to that moment where you were first building with it. What was it like to discover that it was working well, or what were some things about it that really stood out to you? And then what did you end up building?
I think this feeling, like I was saying, of making something that an agent can use very easily is very rewarding. I remember at the time, so my task was to take some WordWire flows and make them available through an MCP server. And and the first few flows were hard coded into the MCP server, but then I added a little something where, so on WordWare, when you publish a flow, you can very easily connect it to an API. And so I added a little script that you could run on your laptop where you would just give the ID of your flow, and it would automatically fetch the right information and create a tool out of it. And it felt really cool because at the time, I didn't really know WordWare yet, or not as well as I do now. And I was already seeing the capabilities of what was possible to be built. What I mean by that is in WordWare, because you can build almost whatever you want, if you can connect this to an even bigger model, like an LLM that can act on your behalf, that unlocks so much. And I was already super excited, and I'm still super excited about what can be built around this.
So maybe look into the future a little bit. What do you think people will build with it? What do you think, whether it's us at WordWare or elsewhere, like what do you think will happen?
It's a good question. Most of the time, predictions about the future end up being wrong, but I'll give it a shot. I think what I'm seeing right now first is the surge of lots of new MCP servers. Not even necessarily about, and I think the ones I'm really excited about for very, very much of a personal use are the MCP servers that interact with, for example, your laptop or your browser, because I think it for now it exposes big security risks.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the future, that could enable an agent to do so much if it was able to access. I think I see MCP as this gateway to for agents to access almost everything. However, the problem right now is MCP still suck. I remember, well, at WordWare, our CEO made a demo a bit earlier, like I think a month ago, about trying the Slack MCP, and he was actually trying to message you, and
Yeah.
everyone remembered how it failed miserably and how he tried figuring it out on himself. And I can tell you that
I think it ended up like messaging our general channel. So
exactly.
that could go really wrong.
Yeah. And I can tell you that we're definitely working on something to make this better, and because our vision is right now. So I was saying that MCP is a wrapper around tools, right? It enables the agent to use those tools. But tools right now are very much just an API request, or very much like accessing files on your Mac. But what if those tools were a bit smarter? What if you were to put more intelligence in those tools to make them, and to not have all the intelligence be at the model level, like to not have Claude have to figure out which MCP tools to use, but also have some intelligence in the tools themselves. And where I can tell you, I'm not gonna say too much, but we're definitely exploring stuff around this area, and I'm super excited about it.
So maybe to go on that thread a little bit of what you were talking about before, where it's not perfect yet, right? It's still, there are still areas where it breaks and it's not fully functional yet. What were the biggest pain points? Like when you're building with it today, what are some of the biggest pain points? And do you see any gaps in currently what it does? And yeah, what would you, let's say you were talking to the Anthropic team, what would you tell them?
MCP started as, okay, an MCP server needs what we call a transport layer. So your tool will make an action, like call an API, for example, and it will need to transfer that response to your client, to your Cloud desktop app. There are different protocol to transfer the tool response to your client. And at first, the Anthropic team decided to use what we call standard IO. So this only enabled MCP servers to be local on your machine. So you couldn't use them like if it was a pain to set up. You needed, and you still do, you need to open your Claude desktop config.json, which already like, most people don't know what it is. It's a bit difficult for non-technical people to find the file, and you need to modify it in a specific way. You might need to install Node to run some commands. You might also need to have Docker installed. It's a bit of a pain. But recently they came out with two new modes of transport, two new transport layer. One is SSE, so server sent events, and the other one is streamable HTTP. So I won't get into the details of it, but what that enables is to basically have hosted MCP servers. And that really changed the game because you could have any company like WordWare, like GitHub, anyone who could just give you a URL that you would still have to put it in your Claude desktop config.json, but you didn't have anything else to do. You didn't need to run your server locally, etc. And the MCP server would just work. So still, there is a small pain point around
just getting it set up.
Exactly. But I know that the Anthropic team is currently like making progress on this, and they are, I think they've added recently in their web app a way to add custom integration and to just put a URL, which is game changing. But right now it's only available for members of the max plan. So you have to pay $200 a month, which is not accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
But it's also fun to see that even though Claude hasn't made that change yet to everyone, there are some small MCP clients that are emerging a bit everywhere. I remember looking at this because at first I didn't want to pay that amount to just test it.
Yeah.
And there are some pretty cool projects around here. It's just
I'm sure there's someone around here that could fund it, right?
yeah. But there are some pretty cool projects around that are being built. It's just still very early, so we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. Just maybe taking a little bit of a step further into the future, what do you think is going to be like the types of tool use that are going to be enabled by this? And I think we're already seeing a lot of things where people can, like the other day, I was actually interested in checking it out, and I was able to vibe code my way into changing the JSON file and setting up a MCP server for my own laptop. And I had it basically reorganize my downloads folder so that it could be more organized and not just be like a dump of all this random shit. So that was super fun. And I was able to do that. But like you said, it was really janky and hard to use. Like in the future, what do you think from a product standpoint will need to happen so that people don't need to go through all that pain?
So for the MCP servers that interact with your hardware, like with your laptop, honestly, I don't know how we're going to solve that and make that easy to do. Because right now, unless it's like a desktop app you install that already has access to a lot of stuff, but people are a bit scared of just giving privileges to like all privileges to an app like this.
Yeah.
So
and there's obvious security
exactly
issues. Yeah.
So I don't know how that will evolve. I think there is another interesting problem, and that's like the more MCP servers are being used and the more MCP servers are being created. I think that's awesome because, for example, I'm sure that in less than, I'm betting actually, I'm almost quite sure there must be like an MCP server to order pizza or to do any sort of things. And that's awesome. But the question is, how do you find those MCP servers? So there've been super cool projects being built around that. Like I'm thinking of Smithery, I'm thinking of Glama. So those are MCP directories that expose lots of MCP servers. And I think they're doing a great job at that. You don't want to use any MCP servers. Some MCP servers might contain security vulnerabilities. And so I know that one of those websites, I don't remember which, has like little badges where like with security levels saying that, okay, this server is security approved or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing. Once you have that, once you have those, all of those MCP servers, how do you find the right one? And that's very difficult. They've made tools to find other MCPs and execute them. How would an agent find the right tool to use? And that's definitely an open question.
It's almost like building an app marketplace for AI.
But AI is not, even for some humans, it's difficult to find the right app. So
Right.
how will an agent figure it out? And so I'm really eager to see how people try and solve this problem. And yeah, we'll see.
So, what do you think about the security constraints, the things that this exposes? For example, giving it access to go into my laptop and do things, right? Like maybe today we'll allow Zoom to have access to my microphone and my video, and that seems pretty comfortable to me as an end user. But giving access to my file system and allowing it to make phone calls for me, something like this, like it seems it will be really difficult. Do you think that these problems will just eventually be we'll look back on it being like, oh, I can't believe we actually cared about that? Or do you think that there will need to be serious education or something within the industry that needs to happen?
Actually, I've been really surprised how many companies have added their own MCP servers. I think that's already a good sign
Yeah.
of people that are willing to change.
In some way, by standardizing it in this way, it
Exactly.
makes it easier to address security problems.
Yes. Also making it like an open source protocol and stuff is great. I still believe that even if some companies are not willing to change, that and I remember Gary, the president of Y Combinator, I remember a tweet I saw a couple of weeks ago about him saying that the future of agent interaction with the world is either through MCP servers or through tools like browser use that control your browser and take action on your behalf. And I think I agree with that. Like those websites that will decide to not build MCP servers, they will just have agents that will use your browser and access and do stuff on those websites. It's still,
But it'll almost feel like using a USB stick instead of using the cloud to transfer files or something like that, right? Like browser use is a little more clunky.
Yes, right now, browser use is not as reliable as I've done a few stuff with it, and it's still not as reliable as I expected it to be. There are still a few flows and a few objectives or goals that it cannot do. So we'll see how it evolves, but I'm definitely like seeing a lot of stuff in that space as well. People are definitely innovating a lot. So I don't think in less than a year we'll definitely have a very good browser agent.
Okay, so maybe it'll be pretty quick as well. You never know what's going to happen in this industry. Keeps it fun, but it's also a little bit unnerving. In any case, you've been using AI now. I'm sure you've also had experience in the past prior to using a lot of AI. We've had this discussion here internally in terms of MCP versus what it was like building before MCP. Can you comment on that, like building on just raw APIs versus building on MCP? Is there a big difference for the engineering experience or the developer experience?
Yes, I would say there is a big experience. It all depends because I would say I'm not the best to answer this question. I think I haven't built agents in the past that much. Like I would say
Okay.
about a year ago, I wasn't building agents and the experience must have been very different at that stage. Right now, it made things easier, but I still know people who are I think it really depends what kind of agent you want to build. If you want something that's extremely reliable and you want to optimize for reliability, you might not use MCPs and you might just make your own, whether it's your own MCP server or your own tools straight away. You don't need this wrapper to have something that's very specific and that your agent will know how to execute. And I think this is still the case because right now MCPs are not extremely reliable. People are still going for those things. For example, a tool like Manus, I don't know if they're using MCPs for their own tools. They might just have hard coded those tools. I think what MCP opens is like the internet. It allows you to execute and have almost everything, but then you don't have it's almost if you were only using 5 really good websites, but what if you want to do lots of other stuff? How are you going to do that if you don't know how to use those other websites? So
It feels like it opens up more innovation as well in some way.
yeah, definitely.
In terms of real life application of MCPs, since we're moving towards that, what do you think we will see in the future in terms of like real life applications what will be like the first wave of real life applications in agents using MCPs?
I think people will not be able to tell that an agent is using MCPs or not. I think
Okay.
it will depend actually. It will all depend on this whole paradigm that I was talking about earlier of should we have less tools that are more intelligent or more tools that are more specific? And that will play a lot in, I think, whether or not we have the first or the second, you might still need this wrapper to expose your tool to other systems. I think that's the real benefit of MCP.
If you're building like a SaaS platform today, like you probably are considering in your mind, like, should I have an MCP server?
You could. Yeah, I know actually Stripe released something quite cool where a template to make a monetizable MCP. If you would ask people to pay for your API, you can do the same with an MCP. And that already opens up so many possibilities for developers to build cool stuff.
And what other things as a developer that's been building on MCP today, like where do you want to see the developer experience really go?
I can speak from experience. Lately, the docs for the MCP protocol weren't that clear in terms of. So they implemented, like I was talking about earlier, this new transport layer, streamable HTTP, and it wasn't clear. So we knew that they were supporting this now, but there could be more examples that explore how to actually use this new transport layer. It sucks because they released this, but most MCP clients that most people use don't support this transport layer. And in their docs, they say, yeah, you should stop using SSE, which was the old standard, and use this new transport layer and build servers that use this new transport layer. But how are you supposed to test those servers if the major MCP clients don't support this new one? So I think it's small details, but actually they can matter and they affect your developer experience, definitely. So but it's going to be resolved very quickly. I think I was just very early on trying to implement this myself.
Yeah.
But yeah.
At the risk of sounding potentially a little bit, I am not a programmer, a little bit like naive. It feels like the world is moving towards using these IDEs like Cursor and Windsurf, where AI is already helping you code. So do you think in the future there will be like some hookup with these types of IDEs that you just ask it to do something and it'll already have the primitives that will know how to instantiate the right things and put the right things in place?
It's funny that you say that because Cursor and Windsurf already are MCP clients. You can connect your MCP servers to Cursor and Windsurf and use your MCP service, which shows that this problem is a real one and that you're not the only one thinking about this.
Okay, cool.
And like you were saying, that enables a lot. I was at the hackathon about 2 weeks ago, very big MCP hackathon. And I remember people built something that you could use inside Cursor, an MCP server called VibeOps that would enable you to deploy your app that you built super easily through an MCP server, only through your chat interface. That's also something that it's going to enable developers a lot.
Yeah, if the developer experience in the future looks like interacting with one of these IDEs, then a lot of the developer experience will be served through that in many ways, right? Honestly, like when I was configuring the JSON file, like I just had Cursor do it. I was like, dude, I want to do this. And then it did something and then it didn't work. And I pasted the error logs back into Cursor. And then it was like, oh, okay, I'll fix this. And then I like shipped it and then it seemed to work. It feels like this is like my own experience in vibe coding. It was just this really small experiment, but it feels like that's where everything's going.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you're talking about this because it opens up a big question, which is, do you think everyone will become a programmer in the future? As in, like everyone will use tools like Cursor, etc. Or do you think that there'll be so many tools already built that you will never need to build another tool and that you will not need to code? Which is like this line, and you have a cursor in the middle. Which way do you take it in? Become infinitely more technical or just not technical at all and let everything work?
Personally, I feel like everything is moving towards less programming required, but the programmers that will need to be like really effing good are going to be like the ones sitting behind these actual products. The people sitting behind the products that are helping you code, that are helping you build. Those programmers are going to have to be really good so that the actual products that allow you to build and do those things work really well. And they've thought of things before we've thought of them, like me specifically. But I feel that today, if you're really motivated and you have Cursor, like you can probably code something up if even if you don't have much programming experience. And you can figure it out. Maybe this has been true for a while. Like you look at YouTube or like you look at Reddit or you find the like right way to go. If you're really motivated, like you can figure out a way. And I think that's why these young motivated kids coming out of high school, even, they don't need to go to college to learn how to code. They're just really motivated and they learn by themselves. And that's been true for a long time, but I think it's going to become even more true, right? Where if you're really motivated, like you can use an IDE to do a lot of the work for you. And that might be a good starting point for some of these folks who are going to end up being like really amazing programmers as they start this way. And they're like, oh, this is shit whenever I try to do something really serious. So maybe I have to learn even more and be like really good at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's funny because I was looking at Twitter the other day, or X, however you call it. And so we are already in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
A place where many smart people and lots of founders, and every day you meet 18 years olds who are super cracked, building very, very cool stuff. And so it felt like this was the norm. And now we're starting to see 14 years olds building stuff as well. And that's definitely something new that is becoming possible with tools like Cursor and Lovable. Is
Right.
the age of being able to build stuff and releasing it to the world has become even lower. So what will those kids become? The only thing is I have no idea how they are learning and if they are learning, because there is this rule many people have started noticing that if you vibe code stuff after 10,000 lines, it's very difficult to keep on going because maybe the LLM messed up the architecture of your project, etc. And it's very difficult to iterate on this. So you might be
Yeah,
stuck
it's
and
it's
not.
like the context window is so big, right? So it loses context on everything that it's previously built. So it doesn't really know the whole system. And but honestly, isn't that true for humans too, right? If you who's really keeping 10,000 plus lines of code in their head?
No one, but it's not about necessarily keeping those all those lines. It's not what really matters. It's how do you want to architect your system for it to evolve and be easy to iterate on. And it's all about how you prompt the model at first. And I know there are ways of asking it to do a very precise diagram of the system you want, etc. But if you don't think about that and just start prompting, and that's how you get into a super fast iterating cycle, then you might end up being stuck. Yeah.
And there's part of me that feels, let's say the 14-year-old comes out, they build a really cool app and it goes super viral. And like now there's thousands and thousands or millions of people that are using it. That's the point at which you really do need someone who knows what they're doing, because at that stage, like having been at companies like Stripe and Notion, like when you have that kind of hyper growth, the problems become much lower level than just what's being built on the front end or even built on the back end. It's more about even more depth into the actual architecture of the system. So does that change a lot with Cursor and Windsurf? Does that change a lot, or like those programmers who are really cracked at building massive, big, complex systems, like the people who are sitting there like actually serving those millions of requests a minute for ChatGPT or for,
Yeah.
whatever.
I'd say it's very subjective. It will really depend on who you talk to. People will have very different opinions. I will say that I recently saw, so as at the time we're recording this, Claude 4 Opus was released a week ago or
Yeah,
something.
a week ago.
And
We put it into WordWare like right away.
yeah. And I remember seeing this Reddit post of an engineer who was talking about, like, a senior engineer at a major company was talking about how there was this bug he really couldn't figure out that he spent 6 months on and that he ended up figuring out. And so when Claude 4 Opus came out, he was like, okay, I'm going to test this model on this bug that I really couldn't find. And this model was the only one able to find this bug that all the other models couldn't. So I think, and you'll start seeing that with as more and more as the models get smarter. I still definitely think that, and that opens up actually another very interesting discussion, is right now lots of people are saying that React might be the last framework of all, that there might not ever be other JavaScript framework. Or what I mean by that is there won't ever be another JavaScript framework that's used as much as React. And why is that? It's because if you look at the training data, React maybe has the most examples and the most tutorials on the internet. And that makes LLM extremely good at React. And so people are going to start thinking about what framework they want to pick depending on how good the LLMs are at using them. And that definitely shifts the priorities a lot. We'll see what happens with that. And who knows, we'll also see how React evolves. But it almost feels like I don't want to say the end of like innovation for frameworks, but
Getting existential.
Yeah.
It does beg the question when you mention it in the context of React, which is a kind of more for programming. But if you abstract that out to all things, if LLMs are really trained on basically everything up to 2024, 2025, and you assume that the adoption of AI is going to be so rapid and so fast, and everyone's going to be using it pretty soon. We have a line in the sand of what's the end of innovation in some way for a lot of these things, because I honestly, personal belief is that innovation will not stop. Humans will continue to innovate and do new things and come up with new ideas. And those will become the new things that people like, that go viral and people like, because everything that's generated by LLM maybe becomes banal. But maybe not too. Is there an end to innovation in some way?
Because you see how you have this Gaussian curve of the whole population. I think if LLMs start being really important in your life, and that you start asking ChatGPT about everything, we might see this Gaussian curve get a bit thinner and more centered around the center, because people are going to start believing the same thing and doing the same thing, etc.
And we already have that in many ways from like social media and stuff, like
Exactly.
people just converging on certain ideas, and that becomes the end like thing that wins basically.
Yeah.
Existential. But yeah, it's been so fun talking to you about MCP, and we've gone into other parts of things as well. But yeah, really excited that you were able to come on and talk about it and share with the world. If anyone wants to chat with Hugo, he's just hugo@wordware.ai. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions coming out of this. And we'll keep some links in the description below for how to reach us and how to join our community and keep this conversation going, because we're all kind of part of this. We're in this soup of this new world of AI, in what people are calling this super cycle of AI innovation. So we're really excited to continue building here. Hugo is going to go back and keep building MCP tools to be used in WordWare. And yeah, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys. See ya.